Admiral Hammond, welcome. You'll be pleased to know that I'm actually a supporter of the Collins-class submarine and have been for many years. I notice in page 78 of the annual report a statement that in June this year the first life of type extension of Farncombe was announced to commence in 2026. And highlights there that the LOTE program will ensure the availability of Collins through the transition without compromising on safety and I assume capability as well. I see in the PBS this year in table 54 that over $1 billion has been approved for LOTE as well as a couple of subsequent amounts for that program. But my question goes to the oversight of the program and particularly the Valdez report. And FOI has identified that there are two documents that match the definition or the criteria of being an interim or final report for the LOTE assurance activity by Valdez, but the FOI authorities did not deem to provide either of those. But the second criteria was, is there any final or draft of a government response to that activity? Can you inform the committee what the status is of the Valdez report and any government response to that? Because this is a critical program. It's over $1 billion of taxpayers' money. If there is an assurance process underway, there should be some degree of feedback or transparency at an appropriate level of detail as to where that's up to.
Okay, Senator Vice Admiral Mark Hammond, Chief of Navy. Firstly, thank you for your support for the Australian Submarine Force. With respect to the Collins Life of Type Extension Valdez report, that was a report commissioned by the government as advice to the government, not by the department. So, as I understand it, it is with government for consideration.
And has government engaged with Defence to discuss the contents of that report?
I'll refer to my learned colleagues in Navy Shipbuilding Sustainment Group, Senator.
Senator John Chandler, First Assistant Secretary, Submarines. Yes.
Thank you. That's an accurate answer to a very precise question, but the intent of the question clearly is government giving any direction to Defence as to whether they wish to see Farncombe continue as currently budgeted for in 2026, or is that program going to be rescoped yet again or cancelled, and how many of the boats are going to go through that program?
Senator, there's a few parts to your question, so I'll try and get them all. Basically, the plan of record for the life extension of the Collins class is all 6 Collins class submarines for a full 10-year operating cycle preceded by a full cycle docking. In terms of government direction in that regard, and there was an announcement on this which was issued by Minister Conroy on the 5th of June that include government approval for the initial implementation of the life of type extension that will commence with HMAS Farncombe. That approval relates to the way we contract our arrangements with ASC, which is over 4-year periods, and that 4-year period includes the period where the Farncombe life of type extension will commence, and that's the period that we're in now.
So that is part of the question, but the other part of the question is, did the Valdez report inform any direction by government to Defence as to changes that may be beneficial in how the program is run or oversight, given that this was an assurance function that the government commissioned to satisfy themselves that everything Defence was doing and ASC and other stakeholders in the system was the optimum pathway. There we go, we use that term again. I'm interested to understand whether this has been something that's just gathering dust on the shelf, or is it adding value to a critical program for Australia's defence capability?
The independent assurance activity was commissioned by the Minister, so ultimately they would be best placed to determine whether it added value. But in terms of a change to direction, I don't think so. I think it affirmed the direction, and the way that you can see that is in that media release that I mentioned, Senator, where Minister Conroy announced the initial LOTE implementation, and in that media release is a combination of reference to direct defence advice and independent assurance. I acknowledge that it's not specific about the source of the independent assurance. I just believe that that independent assurance report was part of the independent assurance.
Sure. I'll cede to Senator Birmingham in just a sec, but my point is independent reviews, such as the Coles review, transformed Collins and the Collins enterprise from being something that was barely capable into world's best, in fact probably exceeding the benchmark for world's best practice in terms of availability and capability, because the government took it on board and implemented it and used it to direct actions by defence. What is not clear at the moment is whether there has been any consideration of this work that's commissioned, I assume at a cost to the taxpayer, and whether it is informing government to provide appropriate direction to defence in terms of Collins. And your answer has not given me any assurance that it's not just sitting on a shelf gathering dust. So, Minister, perhaps can you answer on behalf of the Minister whether the Valdez report has actually been scrutinised by government and is informing their engagement with defence on this capability?
Well, Senator, a couple of points. As I think the committee has been informed previously, the Valdez report is a classified report. There are limitations on what we can discuss in this forum about its contents. As officials have said to you, it's a report to government, and I will confirm this. If I'm wrong, I'll correct it, but my understanding is that it is before the ministers.
Before the ministers can mean a multitude of things. So is it in his in-tray, waiting for him to work his way down to it? Has he read it and we're waiting for a response? Where is that up to? I don't need to know the content. I'm interested to know if it's being used.
Senator, I am myself not the minister. I represent the minister, but I understand that he has received the report. As I've indicated, it is classified, and the government will make any response that they consider appropriate at the time that they assess it is appropriate.
Can you take on notice then, Minister, whether he has actually read the report?
I can take that on notice.
Given all the other things he has as Deputy Prime Minister to do, has he actually asked the department to come and brief him about the import, considerations, consequences of any recommendations in the report?
Has the Deputy Prime Minister, was that the question, Senator?
Yes, or Minister
Conroy.
The request has come from Minister Conroy's office to me. That's the request I can see, Senator.
The request to brief him on the report?
To provide departmental advice in relation to the report.
So you have provided departmental advice in relation to the report?
I've been asked to prepare departmental advice.
You've been asked to prepare it, but it hasn't been provided yet?
Not to my knowledge, Senator.
When were you asked to prepare it?
I would have to take that on notice, Senator, several months ago.
So, how's the report been finished in June and you've had it for several months with a request from the Minister for advice to be provided several months ago? Why is that taking so long?
Senator, the report considers the broad range across the Collins capability. It's quite a complex report. It's got a lot of considerations to it. It requires a fair degree of consultation across different parts of the department. It's just a complex thing to consider and respond to.
Does the DPM have a copy of the report as well?
I don't know, Senator. The report was commissioned by Minister Conroy.
So,
Jesus.
okay.
So,
does
Hammond, as the capability manager, have you sought a brief on the content of the Valdez report to get an idea of changes to the whole submarine enterprise that could make it more capable, sustainable, available, all the things that you as the race train sustain responsible officer are interested in.
Senator, I was engaged by Ms Valdez during the process. I have seen the interim report and the final report. I think behind your question is an assumption that the report is of a similar scale, magnitude and intent as the Coles report, as opposed to the intent of the Valdez report was an assurance check on current plans for life of type extension, feasibility and implementation risks, etc., to provide the Minister with an expert view independent of the department. The response to the Valdez report in that context boils down to a gap analysis between what we're doing and what that expert opinion proffers might reduce risk. Without going into any of the classified detail, I'd submit that the gap between what we are doing and the progress we have made and the mitigations, etc., is largely positive.
So I'd hate to cause tension between the operational world and the sustainment world, but on my right of ARC, I have, it's not as complex as Coles, it's quite a thin document, it's just a bit of a gap analysis. On my left of ARC, I have, this is a complex document which requires great consultation, it's going to require months.
It's got multiple...
Secretary, you're kind of in the middle there. Should I be coming to you for an answer as to where the complexity of this report really stands, and is it of import to this $1 billion that the PBS has highlighted the taxpayer is paying for LOTE, or do we just take CN's word for it that the gap is small and we should just press on?
Senator, I don't think that's exactly how CN characterised that. These issues are complicated. The report was provided to Minister Conroy. Mr Chandler's looking at a detailed response to that. I think that answer is pretty clear. The CN's expert view about the submarine capability will obviously form part of the department's advice to the minister in response to the report. Could I also say that both Minister Conroy and Minister Miles consult with Mr McDowell and Mr Chandler and also the CN on submarine issues very regularly. So these issues are not sitting in abeyance waiting for somebody to provide a formal report in response to Ms Valdez's work. I think Ms Valdez did excellent work, but our officials, in particular, the Chief of Navy and Deputy Secretary McDowell and his team are constantly engaging with our Minister on the range of submarine issues, including LOTEs, maintenance issues, the state of the boats, what the boats need to be doing to meet the CDF's preparedness directive and to be available to support government missions. So that this is a constant engagement that we have with our ministers.
A very diplomatic response, Secretary. Are you perhaps looking for a job with Senator Birmingham next year after the election? But anyway, do you have further questions?
Yeah, Minister, and then we'll go to our afternoon break.
Simply
Minister?
to add to that evidence, which is that officials have confirmed to you that a copy was provided, the report was provided to Minister Conroy in June. It was also provided to Minister Miles in June.